jumper. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, Sandy. How are you?
Pretty rubbish. How are you?
Well, we're both in our fluffy jumpers now.
Yeah, it's definitely very wintry here.
Yeah, it's 40 degrees Fahrenheit here, so that's pretty cool.
But how has COVID been for you this time?
uh, well, I didn't have a fever, which was the thing that was awful the first time I had it years ago. I had the sore throat and the stuffy nose, and then my personal favorite, the nothing tastes like anything except for metal and goo.
Wow, that's truly
The
horrid. I'm so sorry.
The only thing that tastes like anything is like sugar, which is why I've been eating like brownies and drinking Coca-Cola for the last week because there's nothing else that tastes like anything.
But you
Like
always.
eggs and pasta. And I know I always drink Coca-Cola.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm recovering. I'll get there.
I've called this evening's presentation multidisciplinary, and I was thinking to myself, is Bill a multidisciplinary visual artist?
I like to think of myself as a multidisciplinarian in general, but yes. I don't know. Why? Because I guess the question is, does that mean you do multiple things or that you integrate multiple things into one thing?
Well, take it whatever way you want to. Would you say that you're multidisciplinary?
Yes, but I'm very siloed. I
Meaning?
make music, I make photography, write scripts, but I don't make photographs about my scripts that I write music for. You know what I mean? Like the things are not, they're not, I, 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 I keep things very straightforward when it comes to how things relate. You know, they're separate for me.
Don't they all live inside each other because they're all your work?
Uh, yes, I think that that is true. Um, I guess that makes me into multidisciplinary. It doesn't necessarily make my work so.
Okay. Um, this came up because I have been looking at Karl Blossfeldt across a range of classes at school, and I know that you like Karl Blossfeldt. But one thing that really stands out to me about him, aside from obviously the beautiful photographs that most of us will recognize, is that he started life as a sculptor. And I find that actually an interesting transition from one form of art to another. And of course, you might call into question, and is he truly multidisciplinary because he devoted his life to almost like one thing at a time? But the reason why I thought of the multidisciplinary in him is because I think one had to exist to create the other.
You know, it's interesting. I have a designer friend named Ian Wright who's over in the UK, and he'll make things very who's the Brazilian guy that we like? Who's I'm sorry, COVID brain. Uh, who makes the stuff and then photographs it? Vic Muniz, where he makes sort of things out of stuff, and then he's had me come photograph them before, but he still thinks of the thing he made as the final thing, where Vic Muniz often says that it's the final photograph that is the final thing, not the thing that he is photographing. I
Mm.
wonder if Blossfeldt, to some extent, was just like, wait a minute, I'm making these things and then I'm photographing them. Maybe I should just find things that nature has created and just photograph those, you know?
Well, I mean, I mean, is Blossfelt well documented? You know, I like to get to know artists as much as I can, and when you search information about Blossfelt, at least at the level at which I search, which is obviously relatively superficial, I'm not writing my thesis about Blossfelt, for
Yeah, you're
example.
not a scholar of Blossfeldt.
But from what I have gathered as the information is that, he worked in a foundry as an apprentice from 16. And then after 3 years, he left and he went to study illustration. And that was there where he met the professor that I guess took him on trips where he started photographing plants and flowers. And then, really, 30 years of teaching later, and all the while making photographs as teaching aids, he began to be recognized for the photographs in and of
Themselves.
themselves. Yeah. So I
They were means to
also,
another end and they became the end.
sure,
Somebody,
also,
did
if
he
any,
decide that or did somebody else decide they were the end? You know what I mean? That's the question. Was he like, oh, look, I made this great series of stuff throughout my life. Actually, that's my life's work. Or did somebody say, you're doing all this other stuff, but really it's the stuff you made in order to make the final stuff that's more interesting.
well, I mean, he made two two bookworks.
Yeah.
He amassed like 6,000, over 6,000 photographs. All of them were annotated. So he used the Latin name and the German name for every species that he recorded. Um, but what I found annoying actually was that I found it really difficult to actually find any piece of sculpture of his.
Oh, I see.
And instead, I can find photographs, but I can't find anything that would show me what he made in the foundry, for example, or what he was working on independently in that period. And obviously, he was still really young. I mean, he was under 20 years old when he transitioned away from things that were three-dimensional in terms of making into these more, well, two-dimensional and certainly photographic pieces of work. I mean, he is the bridge, isn't he, between something that is science-based as a photographer and then something that's about being a fine artist.
Yeah, but there
Uh,
was a lot of stuff in the mid 19th century of, sort of, the silhouetted cyanotypes of plant leaves and that kind of stuff. That was like a big thing for a while.
sure, I mean, Anna Atkins is a pioneer of photography. We can't in any
Sure.
way underestimate the value in her work. Her botanical studies are equally as famous as Blossfeldt's. I
So
just
very
found it
Victorian.
I found it interesting with Blossfeldt that he should come at photography from a sculptor's perspective. I think that's what I'm getting at. And also because when I'm working with students at the moment, particularly in 3D design, and we're looking at Blossfeldt as a photographer, it's interesting to me that he's gone from something that has been three-dimensional and his kind of skill set was developed three-dimensionally or as three-dimensional art. Then he moved into photography and photographing things that, of course, hadn't been man-made, that were naturally occurring, plants and flowers. And now I'm using that to inform background the other way for us to make sculptures.
Yeah.
Um, and the nature of art being this thing that can slide into and out of the disciplines that we might coin as being art disciplines. I love that
Sure.
about art and being an artist.
I also think that the world, the media, the press, the world in general has a way of self-selecting for what it finds interesting of some author of for some artist, you know? I mean, I just know from my own work, if you search me, oftentimes you'll get a lot of the motion stuff, which is great, which is
Yeah.
how you found me originally. But that was, 1 month in 2009 that I did that stuff. Um, but somehow it's self-selected to be the thing that I would probably be remembered by the internet if I died tomorrow,
Yeah.
you know. um, and so, certainly somebody in the 19th century. I mean, you went to school for photography. How many of your photographs are available that I could search for right now? Not that many. I've tried. Um, so it's interesting how maybe he felt the same way, and it's just like no one ever gave his stuff credence, and so it just kind of got lost into the void.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, with a teaching career of 30 years, he was continuously working. He didn't have like time away, as far as I know. He didn't have a break. And he was just amassing these photographs, and he would travel widely, particularly in Europe, recording the different plant species that he would find. So he never let up. He never, and this is what I'm trying to get at. I guess it's not like he maybe wanted to be recognized as a photographer, but he didn't give up hope that the work was meaningful.
Sure.
So his hope wasn't necessarily to be a world famous photographer. I think, from what I can tell, his wish was that these records would be useful.
Yeah.
And that in itself is multidisciplinary. And I see this in teaching a lot anyway, is that, my colleagues, particularly in art and design department, we're all interdisciplinary. We are coming from a range of visual art backgrounds, but we all teach everything.
By necessity.
well, by necessity, but also because I think we understand that our practice moves and slides into and out of each other. It's not so much that they dovetail, it's that they actually are really the
Do you think
same
we
practice.
cordon too much in the way we look at art?
We do what?
Like cordon off? Do we separate all of these things too much?
Yeah, I think it's maybe a more,
She's a sculptor, she's a painter, she's a writer. It's just like, well, yeah, all those things are true, but
I think credence is being given to the contemporary artists of our time now to be sort of almost like given permission to move across all disciplines.
yeah.
I mean, you would have seen that through Dada and Surrealism as well, I suppose, where, people like Man Ray, I mean, he was a sculptor.
Yeah, there's a Man Ray show at the Met right now, and it's yeah, it's an interesting set of stuff. Although I will tell you, when I go look at that set of work, there's stuff that I like and stuff that I just go and I walk by. So I mean, and they all sort of sit in different worlds. Do you, when you look at, well, see, you're a bigger fan of contemporary art than I am oftentimes. Or you're more, I don't know, how do I say this? You're not more forgiving. You're more open to it than I
I
am.
think
Where
you're
a lot of
trying to
times,
say that you think I have lower standards about what art is. Why don't you just
no,
come out and say it, Bill?
no, I don't think that at all. I think that I have perhaps too rigid standards of what good art is.
Hmm.
That like if it doesn't fit into some bucket someone described to me when I was 10, I can't make my own mind up about it, kind of thing.
Well, we have had arguments in the past where you've tried to diminish my sense that art can be anywhere and be anything, because then you've
Sure.
questioned with me what the point of it is. Like,
Yeah.
what's the
Yeah.
point of calling art art if it's
If
anything?
everything's art. Right.
Hmm. I mean, I would say that everything is the point of art being everything.
Right. No, 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 sure. I don't even, I mean, yes, if you want to go that far, I mean, even back that up three-quarters of the way. Um, and oftentimes if I look at work made by someone who is both, I don't know, uh, writing poems about the paintings they've made, I either want the poems or I want the painting. The two of it together feels weird to me. That kind of thing, where you
There's
would
maybe
accept that more.
no,
Yeah,
I mean, there's something maybe that's quite derivative in that. What I'm looking at more is somebody who is working across many different formats, and those formats, I think it's very difficult for me to actually now explain as it happens that we've got artists that would make a painting
hmm,
and then write about it and then rephotograph it.
yep.
And that's one thing.
Okay, you're saying that that is a good that is what you're talking about. People who are doing that
There's
kind
no
of work.
value judgment in it, but that's one
Okay,
thing to me. And the reason why I use the word derivative is that, there is what I call illustration proper. And
yeah,
I don't think that's what multidisciplinary artists are doing. I think that they are working in one movement of making, regardless of what method they
well,
use to make.
I see. And
And
do you
you could
think?
look at, I mean, think about some of the artists here. I've got David Nash coming up in a minute, but I've chosen Blossfeldt. He's not the obvious choice as a multidisciplinary artist. I mean, if you
No,
type multidisciplinary artist into Google, I'm pretty sure that probably Picasso would come up. If we were looking at contemporary artists, you could say Yayoi Kusama, you could say Tracy Emin, you could say Cornelia
sure.
Parker, you could say all, these
Yeah,
kinds of artists because they
yep.
visibly use different formats. Whereas the reason why I think Blossfeldt is actually a super interesting artist as a multidisciplinarian is because multidisciplinary
Sure.
artist is because he has gone along in a line with things that he is always good at and always making
Right.
things, as far as I can tell, uh, that are meaningful, that have weight in the world. And, you know, of course, it's right to mention that had he not been a sculptor, I'm not sure that we would see photographs that look like this. And also, there's an element of the kind of engineer in him. You know, he
Sure.
made his own cameras, particularly lenses, and they magnified things, much more than people would have been used to in his lifetime. And we've got a quote. If he said, "If I give someone a horsetail, he will have no difficulty making a photographic enlargement of it. Anyone can do that. But to observe it, to notice and discover its forms is something only a few are capable of." Now, he spoke that in 1929, and he died in 1932. He didn't actually become better known for photographs until about that time. He was in his old age, he was in his 60s, when people started giving him recognition for his photographs. But it's almost like a diligence that comes from somebody being sure that making things is the right way. It's almost like the way, the path is through making art. And it doesn't actually matter if it's sculpture or photographs, but there's something
The way to what? The way to life?
way to life.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
I think also I was just intrigued, somebody transitioning from sculpture into photography, actually, that seems like an interesting movement. It's easier perhaps to imagine that a painter becomes a photographer or a photographer becomes a painter because
Sure. It's like a 2D visual medium, etc. Yeah.
yeah. And there's another person called Ron Mayhew who lives in Florida working now, and he was a sculptor for pretty much his entire career. And then he's become obsessed with taking these photographs that look like 17th century vanitas paintings. And again, I think a lot of what he makes comes about through being aware of like the whole of art.
Yeah.
You David Nash?
I don't think I do.
Um, well, there are similarities with Blossfeldt in many ways. Multidisciplinary because he works across different media, different formats, works in sculptural form mainly. That's what he's most widely known as. Sometimes described as a land artist. He's a contemporary of Richard Long, for example. Um, and he's working with natural materials. He's been working for a long time. He's getting quite old now, I suppose. He must be in his 80s. Um, but the thing that I love about this is how there's a transition from inside and outside with Nash's work. And to me, when I was putting this together, there was something about that struck me as, again, in itself being multidisciplinary. The
Yeah.
capacity to work in different ways, but also then different locations. I mean, I might even go as far as to say the thing that should bind the artist is the kind of notional value of the work rather than the physical process or the space it occupies or, its solidity or not. And, sometimes Nash works in a way that is for an inside space, but I think he's probably best known for stuff that is about the natural world as it happens in the landscape. This is called Ash Dome. This is probably, I guess, one of the most famous pieces of his
So that
work.
would have taken decades to actually make happen.
Yeah, I love the kind of anecdotes that happen about this work. So he planted it, I think it was 1975 or 1977, and it's somewhere in Wales near Mount Snowdon, and it's quite near his house. But anyone who ever goes to visit it or photographs it for, let's say, a magazine, a publication or something, I don't know if they have to sign like like an NDA,
An
like
NDA to say not they don't know where it is.
yeah. So you can't sort of
Well,
just
because you
blanket.
Brits cut down trees like that stupid one in the Hadrian's Wall that somebody
Oh
just
yeah,
cut
that was
down.
dreadful. Yeah, but I just think that this is in itself something that plays around with, well, what art is. What art is
See,
not
okay,
cut.
is the art here the concept? Is the art here the arboreal skills that it takes to actually do this? Is the art here, you know,
No, this is why I'm
writing the
saying that
concept? Yeah,
the sort of notional value of art is the one movement. And this is about pioneering how art is seen, how it's received by its audience, even
sure.
if that audience is remote. For example, I've just said, you can't just go and rock up here. You can't check it out on Google Maps and find it. You have to be in the know, or you have to happen upon it, stumble upon it by accident.
Sure.
Um, but there's part of the pioneer in this working that, though that might not be
That one I really
obvious.
like, by the way.
Yeah, there's lots in this kind of series. He's very interested in these three forms. I mean, I put cube on here, but the sphere, the pyramid, the cube, different iterations of this. They're quite large scale things anyway. Obviously that, you know, they're large, these these sculptures. But the interplay between inside outside, whether Nash is going to work for something that goes into a gallery space or something that, again, as with Ashdome, has just happened upon in a landscape, is pushing the envelope of what art is generally. But with Blossfeldt is pushing the envelope of what photographs are.
His whole thing feels more contained to me. Blossfeldt's world.
Yet it was a massive undertaking.
No, I don't. Yeah, I just mean that like it's almost where Nash's work seems to be more about taking his brain and expressing it outwards. Blossfeldt's like taking my brain and magnifying it inwards.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But
You know?
I think that's to do with that's obviously a subjective interpretation as well. I would say that with knowledge applied to Blossfeldt's work, thinking about those 6,000 photographs, that 30-year span in which he
Sure.
was making photographs, 40 years really by the time he passed away, you're looking at somebody who has not been limited by time in one way,
Yeah, but that's if it, I will tell you as somebody who's done a lot of long-term photo projects, you know, thousands of photographs over decades is actually only like one every 3 days, you know.
Mm.
So I'm just saying that like I'm not in any way dismissing his work. It's just that like, for him it might have been, oh, I go collect on Saturdays and I photograph on Sundays and I do 7 of them in a day, you know. Um it's just it's interesting. God, could you imagine ever having like look at the space he's got in the upper left at his studio? Could you imagine just like, all right, Sandy, you've got 5 million pounds and you've got this beautiful studio, so you don't ever actually have to like work again to eat,
Oh,
and your job is just to sit around and make stuff and come up with crazy ideas. Oh, you want to bore holes in wood with hot irons? Like, okay, we'll have you a foundry made. You know, like, could you imagine what that must be like in your brain? Is that freeing or is that its own sort of prison?
I think it's the same. I really do think that, I can look at this with envy and I could say, yes, I would like to have a studio and I would like to have all that money and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
But in terms of liberty or being free of expectation or bound by expectation, I think I'm the same as Nash. I think I'm the same as you.
sure. We're all limited by our own brains as much as we are about of the world.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with the external world, I don't think.
Yeah,
Anyway, multidisciplinary artist, I think you are multidisciplinary. Um, it's interesting when I think of your photographs and I think of what you do. And again, you've done, as you say, lots of long-term projects, photo projects. You've been embarking on making a film, which in itself
hmm,
is a long project, will
yeah.
take a while. You are you're doing what all of life does through art.
But I can tell you why I do it, and it's not really romantic.
I
I don't
don't
know.
think there's
It's
anything romantic about what I'm saying, actually. I think there's actually common sense in it. An artist is taking everything they know, even when they think they're limiting what they know to direct it in a particular way. It's like gathering the energy at the tip of your wand and firing out the magic in one direction. It's taken all of the gathering to get that energy to the tip of the wand, right?
yeah, sure.
Um,
But I wonder, you said you listed Picasso as one of your examples earlier, and I've, seen Picasso sculpture shows, and, you know, I think his painting is much better than his sculpture, for example. I wonder, I guess, in his own head if he felt the same way.
I think that's
You know,
whether you're ready to. I think that's actually more to do with whether the observer, the viewer, is ready to become free of expectation.
you think if I walked in and it wasn't Picasso, it was Joe Schmo, and I was like, "Oh, these are pretty good," and then not knowing that it's the fact that it has his name on them changes how I view them.
Yes, but not just that. Um, I think just with anything we encounter, we bring our suitcase of experience and expectation. And
Sure.
I suppose what I'm saying is that the artist might actually be completely free to sort of traverse a wide world stage of making of different forms and formats, but the audience might be bound up to wanting to belong to one thing. Most really great artists, by their very nature, are multidisciplinary.
Hmm.
I'm sure you can argue, people would argue with me about that. Maybe you'd be a better
Well,
artist if you stick with
I
one
mean,
thing.
I think there's a sense that like you're either into making stuff and how you choose to make stuff, whether it's photographs or writing or painting or thinking or whatever,
Mm,
that's secondary to the fact that you even want to do this in the first place.
yeah. I suppose I've also been thinking about how, in that kind of oeuvre of making that we call art, there have been limitations for a long time imposed on us that say that it's only through drawing, painting, and sculpture. And then, of course, along comes photography. Now, along comes AI and generated imagery.
Sure.
Um,
No, but that really isn't art. So
does it make a difference if the person generating the image or behind the generation of the image, does it make a difference if the prompter is also a painter?
what if there is no prompt? What
Mm.
if the machine's prompting itself? Is that still art? Uh, yeah, like my example of that would be I think that Hockney's digital paintings are crap, but you know obviously I like some Hockney work. So is it just that the limitations of the technology he was doing when he was messing around with that stuff in the 80s makes it kind of crappy? Yeah, maybe that's the limitation. I don't know. Um,
Well, I think instead of calling this multidisciplinary, we could have called it limitation.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think to some extent, whatever discipline you initially choose, sometimes you need another one because you're smearing over the lines of one of them into
Mm.
another. It's like
And also,
one's not big enough to contain.
I've become conscious that as we were talking, I flitted about quite a lot this evening. And that's because my mind's not made up about this. I'm just living it in real time with you, what I think
Uh,
one tonight.
Love it. I love living in real time with you, Sandy.
But I was just realizing that, thinking about Blossfeldt and this notion of being a multidisciplinary artist, that actually, maybe he was in fact not multidisciplinary at all because he did one thing and then he switched to another. And much as the sculpture lives in his photographs, by means of him being interested mainly in how the plant grows, for
Shape
example,
and form and whatever. Yeah.
and the kind of scaffold, the structure, and so on of the the form. Nonetheless, he wasn't still sculpting. I wonder to be multidisciplinary if you have to be making in multiple ways at once.
It's a good question.
And
I
whether,
was, I wrote a song 2005, six, that the other day I was like, I don't even know how to play that anymore. So I found a lead sheet I had made for somebody else who wanted to sing it once. And I was plunking around on the chords on the piano, trying to remember how I had played it originally, what fell under my hands. And I was like, oh, this feels so foreign. And yet this was years of my life. It's almost like I got to get back to that. So maybe he felt the same way. Maybe towards the end of his life, he picks up a hammer and whatever form he ended up working in and started playing with pieces of metal again.
I don't know if anybody knows anything else about Blossfeldt.
I'm gonna have to send you some of my fake Blossfeldt pictures.
We should put them on here next time.
Okay,
Okay, Bill. Bye.
bye.